Need a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
No, you have the hearing first, please.
Oh, that's right, we have the hearing first. Okay. Okay, we had the site visit at 5:30 up at LT8. So I will call the hearing to order, and I shall read as the necessary language here, as permitted by Title 19 Vermont statutes and that annotated Section 708, 19 VSA 708 on June 3rd, 2019, the Select Board of Town of Grafton, Vermont initiated the process to discontinue all LT8 as stated below. On Monday, September 16th, 2019, 5:30 p.m., the Select Board of the Town of Grafton, Vermont reviewed the layout of the existing public right-of-way known as Legal Trail 8. Length of the portion subject to this discontinuance is mapped on the current VT Trans Grafton official map as 1.10 miles and will be discontinued in its entirety.
Okay, now if you would swear in any witnesses.
Okay, do we have any witnesses here?
I guess, and then
Yes. Well, how do I, what do I do? We don't have
just swear me in.
Okay, all persons desiring to testify in this hearing will raise their right hand, answer I do to the following. I do hereby have heard that the testimony I'm about to give in the hearing shall be the truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
All right. No others may testify without taking the oath. So if there's anybody else, please let me know now. Okay? Mr. Town Administrator, it's in your hands.
I'm going to go on to the exhibits that we have for the hearing. And the first one is what you have already read, Joe. So that is the notice of the hearing. The next exhibit I want to look at is 3, which shows you the location of the road on our highway map. And if I can get that. It isn't showing up, but this is sideways, but it shows it goes off of Kidder Hill where the site visit was and goes 1.10 miles down to Route 121. It's under our legal trails number 8 and it's 1.10 miles in length. And we're giving that up in its entirety. This under section 708 of the Vermont statutes annotated, 19 VSA. The select board may initiate this process, and when we had a meeting with regard to this road, this highway and legal trail, way back in June, it was moved by Stan Mack to start the procedure to throw up the road from Kidder Hill to the Thaddeus Taylor house. The reason the motion was made that way is we have the road going all the way, as we showed on the map, from Kidder Hill all the way down to 121. That was a gross error, and we talked about that error at that meeting. The description of the road is such that it really goes from the Old Town Farmhouse, which was near Thaddeus Brown, out to Kidder Hill. It doesn't go all the way down. And though somehow we convinced State Highways to put it on our map, we shouldn't have. So that's the reason for the distance of it. The notice was given to all the parties. Well, this is approximately the location of the road. It goes through, it comes off here and goes through what is now Michael Young's property. Then it goes along here and then across. I mean, that's, if it were in existence, that would where it goes. So it goes through Michael Young's property, Hayden and Nora Lake's property, and again through their property, and then go through the Grafton Improvement Association property here. We are required to give notice in the publication, and this was the publication in the Grafton News on September 2019. Those exhibits, by the way, Joe, are all, these exhibits are all in front of you, and they're all numbered at the bottom.
Right.
Okay. This is, let's just talk about this for a second. This is the 1825 description of the road when it was put in. This is how you did it before you petitioned a road with that description, with a description to the selectmen. The selectmen adopted it. Then they adopted it officially and called it a survey road, and that was the survey. And this was what was adopted in Book 1, 1B at page 150. And if you notice here, it's a very short road. It goes from the Thaddeus Brown's house down 20 rods and then 70 rods out to the road.
That was in 1825.
1825, yes.
Clarify that.
This was the notice that was sent to Hayden and Nora Lake as required, and Hayden is here present. I left out at the far end of the road, as you can see from this map, where it goes back down through the, at the very end where it goes into Kidder Hill. Later on, I'll show you there's a notch right here in the parcel maps. This is not on our parcel maps, and so I did not include him in the notice, but he signed off, which I'll show you in a second. And it shows that there's a 50-foot right-of-way from 121, allowing access for lot 2. And this access, in a second I'll address it, will also be reserved to Hayden and Nora Lake for access to their property. And this is what Michael Young signed this morning. He said, provided that he gets all the property in the right-of-way, and provided that he understands that he needs to give a right-of-way to lot 2, which is in the survey map, but also to the Lakes to get to their property. And the reason all of this property, though it goes through lot 2 and it appears to go through lot 2 and lot 3, The reason all this property goes to Michael Young is it says over here that it is all on lot 3 with a right-of-way to 2. So he will continue that right-of-way, but all the land goes to him. These are the other notices that were sent out to you have to notify whenever you're throwing a piece of property, you have to tell Forest Parks and Recreation so they can see if they want it for their trail network. We sent that to them, and that was the acknowledgement that he received it, and then this is a letter back saying that they're not interested in addressing this, that they've talked to their people, and there isn't anyone who was interested in pursuing keeping this road. There was also notice to the GIA, Don Dougal, and to Pat Mack, and to Nancy Merrill. And also, there's an Exhibit 5A that I don't have here. There was notice to the Planning Commission as required by the law too. You have a 5A, which I put in late in your documents. It's right after the 5 document. So the select board, now, the lands, when, according to 19 DSA 775, when you discontinue the road, the lands belong to the property owners on either side of that road, or the property owner through which the land passes. In this case, the land passes through GIA, and then it passes through Hayden and Nora Lake's property, and finally, they have 2 different parcels, then it finally passes through Michael Young's property. So it goes all to Michael Young, as I explained. Everything on Hayden and Nora Lake goes to them, and the GIA property goes to GIA. However, when you do that, Hayden's property, Hayden Lake's property is then cut off. And for that reason, there is the state law says, if that is the case, then there is right of way for the use of the owners of this, this property. There's a right of way across the land where it was before, and similarly here. So there is reserved to the lakes a right of way across this property, which is a GIA property, and a right of way across that property. And the property that is burdened with the access is the Grafton Improvement Association parcel number 009056, and the Michael Young property, which is 009047.4. Oh, there is a second property, 009047.2, that also belongs to him. That's also receives the land here and here, and then Michael has to allow him to get into that land from there, and GIA has to let him get in from this end. Okay. Now, I heard there was a little bit of discussion about exactly where this is because it was so poorly located on our map. It's pretty well located on the ground. We don't have any obligation to survey that out. If GIA and the lakes want to survey it out and do it, they can do it on their own. It may very well be in your deed, Hayden, I didn't look at it, may very well be that it's already there and described in the deed. I don't know. I I didn't take the time to look at it. I was going to, and then I didn't do that. Make sure I cover all those things. So those are the parcels involved that get the property. So not only do the lakes have the right to use this to get to their property, they have the right to maintain it, maintain this right of way on both ends.
Bill, those right-of-ways, are they gonna show up in a deed for like,
They're gonna-
on 121, is that gonna become part of Young's deed at some point that he has to
Yes,
maintain?
he has a very good description of it in his survey.
Okay,
So he doesn't have to worry. What is not going to be, this is going to be, your decision will be recorded, and it will talk about where the highway, and then it'll talk about the highway being thrown up, and that the right-of-way is in the same, it's the same right-of-way as the town right-of-way, but it now belongs to them privately.
So that any owner, if it were to change hands, that right of way would be available so that the new owner would know that there's a right of way there, correct?
That's my understanding. I don't like the way the state law says it, but that's my understanding, that it is actually runs with the land, as they say. I don't like the wording of the state law, but that's, but that, I'm just being careful, because I'm a recovering attorney, that it says, title to the discontinued. That's what, 77, let's see. Well, it simply says it goes to the owners for their use to enter the land, is the way it talks about it.
Because this discussion.
Oh, here it is, a person whose sole means of access to a parcel of land or portion thereof owned by that person is by way of a town highway or unidentified corridor that is subsequently discontinued shall retain a private right-of-way over the former town highway or unidentified corridor for any necessary access to the parcel of land or portion thereof and maintenance of his or her right-of-way. And the reason I think it's in perpetuity is because there's other laws in the state of Vermont says that you cannot create a parcel that is landlocked.
Right. That was a discussion that came up. I mean, it doesn't affect the town, but it would affect the property owners.
Yes.
I think the official discontinuance would then act as proof short of a deed amendment or a survey, so that can always be attached to the deed.
Yeah, if I were in your shoes, I would be confident that it should be an issue based on the law.
So now I'll stop being a witness and just tell you what you need to do is, if you can do one of two things. You can do the findings of fact tonight based on my testimony and the decision based on what I've written for you already, or you can go into a deliberative session and do it at a later date and make up a completely different decision if this decision isn't suitable.
Well, let's hear the board. I mean, I think we should continue, but if there's any issues, let me know.
I'd like to proceed and make a motion that we transfer or throw up that land.
Now, does Stan have to read this, select board members make the motion, and then go on with all the little bullet points? Or?
If no one objects, you can probably do away with the reading of the entire motion, provided that you guys have gone through it and if you're satisfied with it. And the same with the decision later. Otherwise, we just sit here and listen to somebody read for 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, are there any objection to bypass the reading of this,
No.
or whatever? Okay, so then Stan, you made the motion, seconded.
I'll second.
Okay. Okay. Then, are there any additional findings of facts? I guess not, right? Okay, so since there aren't any, let's have a vote of the board on Stan's motion. All in favor of throwing up Legal Trail 8 as
No, you're all in favor of findings.
finding the facts, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the finding of facts, so we approve that. Now, Bill, what? Is that,
Now, on
There's
the
a next step,
next
right?
page is the decision, and that's the.
okay, so now we need another motion for the decision, I guess, or whatever.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, and seconded by?
I'll second it.
Okay, Kathy. Again, can we dispense, or does Stan have to read this? Bill?
You can just.
We all,
Okay, do we all agree that we dispense reading of having it found in the public good? No objection? Okay.
No.
So I guess we can call the question now, right, Bill?
Yes.
So, huh?
we got a
Yeah, we have a motion. So all in favor of Stan's motion to discontinue the road, I assume? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we have completed the hearing, I think, Bill, have we not? And the road has now been thrown up.
Thank you.
Good luck,
Yeah.
I guess. I know it's been a long process.
Been a bit of a journey.
We're here.
We got there.
Yep. And I think you don't have to worry about the right of way, because I think that the state law and everything covers that, so whoever owns the property in the future, I don't think it's ever an issue.
I'll do that.
Your G.
Okay.
We did.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, after you're done.
Yeah.
What was the change? That was in there. Discussion regarding road safety. Okay, that was in.
This is different.
Yeah, okay, that's basically the gravel pit.
Right.
So, all right.
Just so, I just wanted to.
Yeah, no, thank you. I called my note yesterday, I guess he must have made a change. Okay, we need, yeah. You want this, you want these originals back? Okay, so we'll call the select board meeting to order at, let's say 20 after 6, the town garage on September 16th. We need a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
I have two things I want to add to the agenda.
Oh, okay.
One is the Wyndham Regional, did they receive the edited plan and what were their comments? And do we have a format for October 17th? So we know what we're doing as a process for the hearing as select.
Where would you like to add these, Kathy?
Maybe,
You want to do it at between 8 and 9?
sure, it's fine.
Okay, so we have one, so let's say 8A would be the
Wyndham Regional.
Wyndham Regional. And 8B would be the hearing on October 17th.
Right.
Okay, so we need a motion then to adopt the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the amended agenda, say aye.
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 Opposed? We have 2 minutes to approve. We have the minutes of the 2nd, which was the regular board meeting. why don't we do that one first? Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes?
Make a motion that the minutes of September 2nd be accepted as written.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? So all in favor of the minutes of September 2nd as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The minutes of the special meeting, which was held on Thursday, September 5th, we need a motion to accept those, or any additions or corrections?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the September 5th minutes as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The warrants were signed for the last warrants, so that's been done and been presented. Now, Bill, do we have to confirm the discontinuance for our minutes?
Yes, you just need to make a motion to
Okay.
accept the findings and decision of the select board.
Okay, so then we need a motion to accept the decision of the select board, so it goes into our minutes and record. Somebody want to make that motion?
Accept findings and
Make findings and
decision.
decision.
I move we accept the finding and decision to discontinue legal trail aid.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion to present it by Chris? So all in favor of action on LTA as we had with the hearing, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Okay, I guess, Jane, you are up.
That's me.
Oh, okay, and you are up.
Sorry for walking in on the
Not a
hearing.
problem, it's not a problem.
I went to the elementary school. That's the last time I came down to meet with you guys, and then I was spinning.
Would you like to
So
come up here?
I'm happy to if that's easier.
Yeah, why don't you just come up here, I think it'd be easier for everybody.
I know Silas is here also on behalf of the Windmill Hill Pinnacle Association. So I'm Jane Lazorchek. I manage public lands on behalf of the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department. As part of that, I handle land acquisition for our wildlife management areas. As part of that process, when acquiring interests in land, either partial or all fee interest, we're required to offer to meet with towns to seek their approval for any transaction within town. We always take this very seriously, and we never move forward with acquisition without the support of the community via support from the select board. In this case, I'm here to discuss the possibility of acquiring a conservation easement, so partial interest on a piece of property owned by the Windmill Hill Pinnacle Association now. The former Goodrich property is both in Grafton and in Athens, and it fits into what is the Turner Hill Wildlife Management Area. Turner Hill Wildlife Management Area was started a number of years ago largely to protect the beaver-influenced wetlands up on the Athens Plateau. That habitat is ideal for a federally endangered plant that occurs only in these wetlands in southeastern Vermont. It's one of only 2 federally listed species in the state of Vermont. That bulrush ebbs and flows as the water conditions are right in the wetlands. That wetland habitat also juxtaposed with the mast trees up on the plateau, tons of cherry beech, some oak scattered throughout, is ideal wildlife habitat. I'm sure I don't need to tell you all that. I've seen countless times I've gone up there, I've seen black bears that use the area. And the Goodrich property was a parcel that we were interested in acquiring a number of years ago, and had reached out to the family. Subsequently, the family started to work with the Windmill Hill Pinnacle Association years after that to work on a boundary line dispute. And in the process of discussions with the Windmill Hill Pinnacle Association, donated the property to Windmill Hill to own and manage. And our interest here is largely the mast stands on the property. Of the 158 acres or so, just under 100 acres is mapped by the Fish and Wildlife Department as mast production areas. And we've been looking for targeted properties to protect these significant resources as mitigation for the Deerfield Wind Project. Fish and Wildlife Department actually opposed, is the only energy-related project that we've actually opposed in the Act 248 process, but the project went forward anyway. And as a result, we were awarded funding to both study bears and their use in these areas, and we have a bear collar project going on down in the area where the construction of the new wind turbines is happening, to study what those bears actually do once the turbines are put in, which took a number of years because of appeals, and now they're in, and we're looking at how they use the habitat now that the wind turbines have been developed. And in addition to the monies that we got to study the use of the bear habitat, we also got monies to protect land off-site from Deerfield Wind Project in order to mitigate the impacts to the bear beach mast stands. In that case, beach mast stands particularly. Beach being the primary hard mast producer for bears. And so this site has always been of interest to us, and we actually inventoried it specifically for that. Windmill Hill Pinnacle Association is doing largely a donation of a conservation easement to us. We're paying a nominal fee for the conservation easement just to support their stewardship endowment and some of the closing costs they had associated with it. But for all extensive purposes, they're donating a conservation easement to Fish and Wildlife. I expect it to be, we don't have the appraisal back yet, but it's a significant, I expect it to be a significant bargain sale with the price we've agreed upon. And in return, we'll be able to help manage the site for these resources, as well as be able to guarantee public access on the parcel for wildlife-based recreation. So bird watching, hiking, cross-country skiing, all things that Windmill Hill Association already allows, but these will be guaranteed in perpetuity. So in this case, a lot of towns often have questions around taxes or loss of tax revenue when the state acquires land. We make a payment in lieu of taxes when we own land and fee. In this case, the land will stay in private ownership, taxes will continue as is, and so there'll be no change in tax revenue for the town on this piece. So I'm happy to answer any questions or concerns about the project or...
I have a question, and I'm concerned about the vast trail and what it'll do to the snowmobile club.
Yeah,
and
we have
what-
no intention of closing the trail, and my understanding in negotiations with the Windmill Hill Pinnacle Association is that we actually negotiated. They wanted to ensure not only the vast trail, but another road that maybe Silas can speak to. I've walked it, but I don't remember the name. Also remains open for mechanized use, so it's not even only the vast trail, but historic access along the roads that occur on the property. They wanted to ensure could perpetuate with the easement, and we put that in the conservation easement, so mechanized use would stay on the roads only. Is that accurate, Silas?
Yeah, that would be the Walker Road.
Yeah.
As well as the Bass Trail.
And the club with vast would be able to maintain the trail, like trees, clearing, brush and all that kind of stuff that would
Yes.
be prohibited.
Will there be any tree clearing in any of these areas? Or is
No,
it remains
Mhm.
as a conservation?
Yes, it's for conservation, yeah.
So there'll be no logging ever.
Oh no, well that's, our easement does not preclude logging.
Okay,
Yeah. You can do forest management with a forest management plan.
Okay.
But if Windmill Hill Pinnacle Association chose to manage, they would have to do habitat management that was conducive to the resources on the property, but there's not, forest management is totally appropriate even in habitat like this, yeah.
Bill?
Mr. Chair, when can we see the language of the conservation easement?
It's drafted. It's normally a private transaction. We don't normally share them, but we're more than happy. It's public information. I'd be more than happy to send a copy of the draft. We've both agreed upon it, so that would be fine, I'm sure.
If you could send that to me, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah,
I'd
happy
like
to.
have it for our
Okay,
records.
thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other questions of Jane? Board or from the,
I just have a question. Is there still gonna be hunting and stuff like that
Yes.
available?
In fact, the easement guarantees access for those.
And I have another question, I don't know if you can answer, for the Turner Hill Wildlife Management
Mhm.
Program. They've been up there recently, putting trails in. Are those trails for walking, hiking? all that
Yeah,
stuff,
I
or-
wonder if, that's been in partnership with the Windmill Hill Pinnacle Association on our land. We're not actually a department, like, we're not Forest Parks and Recreation
Right.
who tends to promote a lot of trail development. In fact, our main mission is dispersed public access for wildlife-based recreation. But I understand in this case, we permitted a connector trail with Windmill Hill Pinnacle Association on the WMA, because it was a link between two other networks. And so I think my understanding of that new trail will be for pedestrian access.
I'm Camilla Robertson. That has been long being developed, and we're really appreciative of the fact that Fish and Wildlife is allowing for a trail there, because as she says, it's really not typical. But in fact, it's the best way to be able to go all through that Turner Hill Wildlife Management Area, because a lot of it is very fragile and really special to visit. But now you'll have a designated, specific, and managed trail by the Pinnacle Association, and we're working out agreements along those lines with them too. And just one other thing, it's just that usually we have easements with the Vermont Land Trust, which are really very functional, but not quite as, how do I want to put it, not so much flexible, but as generous to the public use and so forth as with the state. So we're pretty happy. We think that it's going to change really nothing about how that property is used going forward.
Any other comments?
No. So what do you need from us? Is
There's
this-
a letter here, Stan, that they need to.
Oh, yeah, needs your,
Right. And the question is, I guess, is that we need to make a motion today to authorize me to sign this. And would you want to sign it before or after you receive the document? I don't think it makes much difference, but that would be up to the board. So if there's no objection, then we need a motion. If not,
I'll make that motion that we sign the letter either tonight or after receipt of the additional information.
Well, make it more specific, so either we do it tonight or
Fine,
later.
we can,
Bill, would you rather have the, review the document?
Yeah.
I think
I think that's more prudent before we go ahead and sign.
So I make a motion, we sign the letter after receipt of the information from the state on the property conservation easement.
Do we have a second for that?
Second.
Okay. Do we have any other discussion on the motion to approve this conservation easement? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So, Jane, then we will, upon receipt of the,
I can send it tomorrow, via
Whatever.
email.
we'll get the letter to Bill, and then we can sign this, or I can sign it now, and you can hold it, whatever you want me to do.
Can you,
You're gone next week.
I'm on a week,
so-
so if you could send it to K Record,
Oh, me? You want it?
please, the letter K.
Yep,
So
and
it's K
then,
Record at graftonvt.org. And also send it to my address as well, because I'll be away, but I'll have the computer with me. So.
okay.
And then once everything is okay, then, I'll sign the letter and get it out to you for this. But I don't think there's any, it's approved, so it's just a matter of.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Danny, you're on next.
She did the discussion regarding treatment.
Yep. Kim, maybe you want to explain, or you want me to explain? We have at the town meeting last March, we passed a warrant that any surplus in the paving would go into a special fund for paving. And the reason for that was that in today's world, to take $106,000, which is what the normal budget has been, to pave a road today, doesn't go very far. So the thought was that we would accumulate the money over a period of a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever, and then do a major project the right way, where they would be, we could do the subsurface and put the fabric in, and not just pave over a bad surface. So we haven't paid now in 2 years, right, Danny?
Correct.
So the question now is, do we take the money and put it into that fund, or, I think there was a question, does it go into the capital budget?
Well, yeah, and what I did is I presented the board with the 3 options after talking with Sullivan Powers last week during our yearly audit. And because we've created a reserve account, you have the ability to take highway monies and any surplus of highway monies and move it into that retreatment and build it as a reserve. There are several options that you have that you can take from this day moving forward, and for every budget after that, is to move the retreatment into the reserve, or any surplus that's left in the highway can be either put into the capital if at some point you find that there's a need for it, because capital is a highway expenditure. You can reduce the highway budget in the future if you feel as though you want to reduce their budget, or like I said, you can move it to the highway, to the retreatment. So those are the 3 options that at this time when we had our audit, you need to make a decision and direct Sullivan Powers as to where we want any surplus. Right now, the fine line is not actually, he's not totally done, but if you look at the preliminary expenditure at the end of June, we're looking at Danny ending with, looks like he ended with $63,767 surplus.
For retreatment?
No, total. That's his total. Within there, we did budget $105,000 for retreatment. Only $17,000 was spent, which actually left $87,755 of unspent retreatment. But when you take the whole budget on a whole, some of it got used up in other areas that were overspent. So it only left him instead with $63,767 surplus. So you've got the option of moving that 10 to 63, because again, the audit will be moving a few numbers. There was some grants that came in against some expenditures that he had. The grants come in the revenue side of the general, and not in it doesn't recover the expenditure in the highway. That's the way the accounting system goes. But they'll tweak that and fix it so it will reflect it. So I guess tonight or the next meeting, it's a choice of what do you want to do with any surplus of the highway. I don't think you're going to want to say a particular number, because that particular number could change. And we're looking for a direction to present to Fred at Sullivan Powers and Sarah, so that they can finalize our budget and note it in there and allow me to move it to a journal entry.
Okay, now
All right, Danny? You okay there?
I have a concern, and Stan and I, this extra money that comes from the ditching programs, that doesn't get into, so we really might have a higher surplus than $63,000, correct?
Correct.
Is that right?
Possibility.
Okay? So I want everybody to understand that, and again, I call it funny accounting, but that's just my word for it. But this money that we get from the state to do this mitigation for ditches and stone line or whatever, or grants, we get that. But we don't put that in as income.
It goes in income in the general. It can't offset the expenditure.
But it doesn't offset the expenditure. So in reality, when you say we have a $63,000 surplus, it could be a $100,000 surplus. I don't know what the real number is. So, I mean, I think that's something we have to keep in mind when we decide where this money's gonna go. Yes, Bill?
But the municipal fund, not including highway, is only $600 to the good, tentatively.
Yeah.
Including the 18 or, what is it, 18 to $26,000 that we got for the.
Well, is that true?
Yeah, so that could bring down ours. But there's a law that plays these figures, because we had a town hall restoration of 36,000, but that's still sitting in a reserve, but it's not, it's showing as an expenditure
Right.
Oh, okay.
in the general. So again, the general will tweak a little
Right, so we
because
don't
it's
really
sitting
know.
in, we don't really know. So that's why I said we don't want a complete dollar figure to move. We need more or less any surplus. Do you want it to go into the retreatment reserve?
I need a clarification on this thing. This says a discussion regarding retreatment surplus. This is not a retreatment surplus. This is it's retreatment that's in the budget and the surplus. It's two different things, right? We're not talking about a retreatment surplus. Because we put money into retreatment that we're going to put, at least in my mind, we're going to take the money that we have in the retreatment for this budget and put it in
Right.
to the reserve account for retreatment. So there'll be 2 or 3 years in
So-
that. And then the surplus is a different,
The surplus is the 63, which is the
Right.
unused portion of your retreatment. But that unused portion of retreatment should have been 87,000, not 63. We're looking, so if you're gonna say that you wanna move every penny that was not spent on retreatment that we budgeted, the
That's
87,755,
right?
and you move that to the reserve, the highway actually only has 639. So you're going to put him in a $22,000 deficit because you're gonna take the 87 and rather the 63.
But that's what was originally,
That is the original.
so that's the
No.
amount that should go into that fund.
No, because the way the reserve was set up, the wording in the article did not leave that every penny that was unspent moves over. It's at the discretion of the board to put any monies into a reserve retreatment. So it left it open that you don't have to, you're not held accountable to do it, and you're not held accountable for just the retreatment line item to go in there. Fred said the way the wording went, it's you shall, or you may, and you don't have to, and you don't have to do dollar for dollar to bring it over.
But the intent was,
Yeah.
The intent is different than what was written, so we're going by the article.
okay,
But you
well,
don't want to go into a deficit,
Well-
because a deficit has to be paid back within the same year.
Well, but the issue is that we, the select board, presented an article and sold it to the town that we would take this money, the unused highway paving money, and put it into this reserve so that we could then do a proper paving job. And if we don't do that, then actually we didn't, as far as I'm concerned, we didn't explain that properly.
right.
Because I believe they're expecting us to take whatever is left, 87,000, if there was only $10,000 left, that 10,000 would go into the,
Like I said, it's totally up to whatever you want to. I'm just telling you that this is the way the article is written. This is the way you do the numbers. So, like I said, that's gonna put you in the red on the bottom line. Because you don't have 87,000 available. You only have the 63.
well, maybe you just put, I mean, I'd have to think about it, and the board would have to
Yeah.
decide.
And that's why I
I
gave it
got
to you now,
But,
rather
but
than
maybe
in
we only put
October.
the 63 in, so we don't have a deficit, but we don't have the final
Exactly.
numbers yet either, so we don't know.
Yeah, you don't wanna put a number on it, you
No.
wanna
You
take
don't wanna put a
it,
number,
whatever
you wanna
the
put
surplus
any-
is in.
Right.
Yeah.
If you were to say any surplus from the highway moves to retreatment, that's fine too. And then we'll know what the bottom line is after Sullivan is done with our audit.
Well, let me ask you, Danny, what is your, I mean, originally you were the one who came to us and said, let's build this fund up rather than just so we could do a proper paving job.
Well, I'd like to see the full amount put in there, but I don't want people paying a deficit with
No, I
all
know.
the increase of taxes already. But I'd like you to see whatever the surplus ends up being
Go in
to
there.
put that in. I think Kim and I figured it could be almost like 80,000.
It could be pushed.
So we're only off by like $6,000 of what would have gone in there anyway, because there's some grant stuff that needs to be moved around. You know, like you say, on the grant stuff, it comes back in revenue. That stuff there, adjust all that in the end, but I would like to see any surplus in the highway get put into that paving, because we did sell it as
Yeah.
any money, you know, out of the 105 would go to that so that we could fix a section of road like we did down by Jock Ells. And if we don't, I think if you don't hold that honor on it, I mean, it's kind of a
No, that's
pointless
what I think
thing.
whatever's in there for repaving.
A quick question. Is there a reserve today with any money in it for this?
Repaving?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Almost 200,000, 180,000, I
In
think.
what?
In the
In the
reserve
retreat.
fund for paving, it's about 180,000.
No, we don't have anything. We just created the article, so there's nothing in the reserve yet. We budgeted 105, only spent 17.
There was some money left over that was in there, wasn't there?
Not yet. We haven't started moving.
The last year was the year you voted on the article.
Okay, that's right.
Was it just last year?
So whatever was left in this budget that we just come out of would be
Okay.
what would go in there.
That was 80-some odd thousand, I think, wasn't it? Because she used 15,000 on
Yeah,
35.
like
and
86,
whatever.
87,000.
Yeah.
Well, to follow the intent of that, I just think anything that's in retreatment should go into that reserve.
It could put you into like a $10,000 deficit. in the
Well, the thing, you know, and I think one of the problems that I have with this whole thing is if we're gonna, if we have money and we're trying to put it away, and then we end up using it to cover a deficit, we're not doing our budget very well, for whatever reason. And this is for the whole thing. If we can just take instant money and cover a deficit, I think we gotta do, and maybe we have to have better control of the budget rather than taking money that we're trying to put aside and just cover a deficit with.
But you'd want to raise the tax rate to cover a deficit when you've got money that you're just moving over?
But we had that money there for a very definitive purpose.
But it doesn't have to be,
I
is
mean, it
what we're
doesn't
saying.
have to be, but that's why that money was put there.
But you need to think of the taxpayers in raising their tax rate.
If we didn't have a reserve, we would have spent 105,000, you would have had a deficit.
But that's true. And under normal circumstances, in years gone by, before we come up with this new program, Danny would have taken the 106,000 or 5,000 and he would have paved some road. Whether you skim coated it or whatever you did, and the whole intent was not to throw the money away and put it into a road that is only gonna last 5 years and redo it again, but do it to a road that might last 10 or 15 years, like
But you-
121.
You might have tightened the budget elsewhere
Maybe.
at some point, so you don't have a deficit.
But they can revisit this every year, right?
Yes, every
So,
single year.
so this year, after they make the changes, you still would be honoring it, but you might be like at a shortfall of maybe $6,000, $7,000. But you're not gonna know that until you tell Fred where you're gonna put it.
Right.
Right.
But you're gonna be close to putting what you said you were in there this year.
Bill, you had your question? Had a hand up or?
Well, I think you're Monday morning quarterbacking, because if we had spent the 105, we probably wouldn't have done Chester Road. Period.
I don't know, maybe. I agree with Stan, except for one thing. I would only put the money in so you don't have a deficit. I wouldn't want to see us go into a deficit. So if it turns out to be 80,000 and you're $6,000 short, so what? But I certainly wouldn't, I would certainly put as much of the surplus into the fund. That's my feeling.
I can't imagine the taxpayers would balk about putting in whatever we have towards it. It's not like we're splitting it, or you'd be splitting it, or you're gonna put it to something else entirely. You're doing the best you can under circumstances.
Tim, when is your audit gonna be done?
It's for a road.
As soon as I can give them this answer, they're going to give me the figures to move around and move stuff.
So what you're looking for us tonight is to have a motion or tomorrow?
Or at least by your next
Next
meeting.
meeting, whether it
Because-
goes, whether any surplus goes into the retreatment fund or the highway, whatever it is. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah, we're looking for whether direction, do you want any surplus to go just to the highway reserve,
Okay.
is what I'm looking for.
When you say highway reserve, you mean the retreatment?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
retreatment.
special
That's the only
fund.
reserve we have, yeah. Is the highway reserve.
And is that exempted from being used for deficits?
Once it's in there.
Once it's in there, it's in there.
It's in there.
Yeah.
It's a lot of
And
box.
the only time, yeah, and the only time it can be removed from there is through a town vote.
Special town meeting or the warrant,
Town
just
meeting.
take it out. I mean, if you had an emergency and you needed that money, you could do that.
Okay.
So does the board want to,
I mean, you can act
Can
on
we-
it
I
tonight.
gotta look
Can
at
we
the numbers.
vote on the 7th rather, we need to get the numbers right.
Yeah, that's what I say, let's look at, get a better
I
handle
wanna
on
vote
it.
You're not gonna get any other different numbers than what we got, okay, just so you know, they will.
as I understand it, what she's looking for us to do is to give direction that we would take the surplus and move it into the retreatment or the special fund.
Right,
That's what you're looking for, not dollar amount, just
right,
there's
just.
a chair over there. So I think that's what you're looking for,
Yes.
not dollar amounts. If
Exactly.
it turns out to be $1 or it turns out to be $100,000, that's what you're
No
looking
matter
for.
what, you guys want it to go
Correct.
to the reserve, is what I'm looking
Right.
for. If you're okay with that, Stan's not too sure, because he'd like to see it go into the red.
Well, well,
I don't wanna see it go
Well,
into
no,
the red.
but I mean, it will.
Let's not go there. But again, I just think it's too easy to take other money and shift it around, so you don't have to, be quite so careful with your budget. That's all I'm saying.
I guess you can
I'm not
use-
saying I want it to go.
Right.
Well,
Well, this can be an
I
example.
agree with you on that.
Just-
but there's two issues, I think. I mean, if we didn't do the proper budget this year, and I haven't looked at numbers, I don't know where we went wrong. Then maybe for next year, we have to do something quite different, but since we have a smaller surplus than we originally thought, why not just take that in and then do your budget, which is gonna start in a few weeks anyway, and do maybe a tighter budget or whatever it takes to stop the, and it might be an act of God that we went over the budget, I don't know. I haven't seen the numbers.
If you actually did all the math out on what your negatives are, the only things that make up some of that deficit is you spent $2,000 on beavers that was not budgeted. And then we had the 35 covert in the dip by Lockabees. That was a little over $7,400. So that part of it. But then like we have a rental that we use that we spent in excess of $5,000 more than we had. And that's where that grant money, we pay it out. And then when it comes back in, it goes into revenue. So you have some money out there that's grant money that's in your revenue. So that's where your money is, that's overspent.
Then why can't we get that from revenue and put it against this? I don't understand that whole thing, so that's what I wanna talk to Kim about sometimes.
So, Kim,
There's other expenditures like on the salt and stuff, but we were way under on sand, so that kinda help cover some of that. But then really, there are three big things right there is why if you put the whole 87 in there, that's where your red is, because you did the 35 covert, the one by Lockabees, fixing that, and then 2,000 for the beavers, and then the rental to do the grant projects.
Was that 17,000 for the paving? Is that where that 17,000
That's where the
went?
17 went for the paving, and then we had two different contractors do work in the stream bed and dig down to the culverts, and that was what that.
That wasn't
7,000.
budgeted. That was not budgeted.
Right, but you gotta figure when you're doing like these grants and aid things, all that money comes out of the highway budget, and none of the money isn't coming back from the grants.
That's what I don't understand, is why that happens.
But
I mean, if it
Fred
comes
is
out of your
supposed
budget,
to
you should get it back.
adjust that possibly, so it does show.
Right.
Right, that has to come back.
So,
I mean, that
and
makes
then-
no sense to
It'll
me.
adjust.
So you'd have almost $36,000 in grants that would come back, and only half of that is showing up because 18.5 of that came back in this year. So that won't show in last year's budget because it was repaid into this year. So they can't move that back. So if all that money came back in the same year you did the work and came back into the highway, you'd be in the plus even after taking the phasing half of that.
And the reason they can't have the revenue come into the expenditures because they need you to see what you expended. If I were to put the revenue that came in to cover whatever grant money or Better Back Roads, and if I were to put it against what Danny spent, it's like, you'll look at this report, it doesn't look like you spent anything, because it zeroed it out. So you need to see what you spent in order to budget for the upcoming year.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Yeah,
But
so
then
that's
somewhere
why you
along-
don't see it in the expenditure portion, you see it in the revenue. And then that's when he will.
Then where does it go when it's in the revenue? It's gotta go somewhere.
Goes into
It's in our
town,
general.
goes into
Well,
general.
there you go, then take it from there and put it back into the highway.
Well, that's what Fred's gonna end up having to do.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't disappear.
Yeah, right, it doesn't disappear.
No, it doesn't. No.
That's why I'm not
That's
an
where you're
accountant.
gonna see it when Fred does.
All right, so the question comes, if the board decides not to make a motion here, whether it gets defeated or whether it gets passed, you won't have a decision until the next meeting, which is, I don't know.
October 7th.
Yeah. Is that, can you
Yeah,
live
yeah,
with
that's
that?
fine.
Okay.
What I'll do is I'll let Sarah know kind of the direction that, we know it's definitely gonna go to the reserve, but we have some more questions.
Yeah, I
And at
mean,
least you can move forward to knowing that we're gonna put it all into the reserve.
yeah, I mean, I agree with Stan. I mean, some of this movement, there's been hocus pocus, Jimmy Otis kind of stuff. It goes in and you can't see it, and it's revenue that you get, but it doesn't take off the expenses. I mean, it's, for a layperson, it's hard for me to understand, and I know Stan and I have talked about this in the past, and the money is there, but it doesn't show up.
Right.
It shows up, but
Shows
not
up
where it should be.
elsewhere.
Yeah. So maybe we'll all need to have an education. Maybe we need to have a special meeting or something where we could sit down with you for a half an hour or something and then explain it to us.
Yeah, or when Fred is here.
Yeah, when Fred is
I
here.
think he's done it before.
Yeah, that would help, that would be, and we don't have to have it on a regular select board meeting, we just call a special meeting at some point when everybody's available. Obviously, the public comes, but I mean, so that we can deal with, because I know Stan has a tough time to grasp it, and so do I.
What if,
Seems to me to be fairly simple.
Good for you.
Well, if you know what the expenditures going out are.
Yeah.
You have a little Excel spreadsheet that puts down the expenditures, and you also have what the revenue is, and that shows you what the project cost you,
Yeah.
okay? I mean,
Well, I don't think it, but
That's not the problem.
the problem is not that, the problem is when you
It
look
doesn't
at,
offset.
when you look
but
at,
this shows you the offset right there. A simple spreadsheet shows you that.
but we don't have a simple spreadsheet, we have.
We have auditors.
We have
But
numbers,
what
which
I'm
is a
saying is that could
disaster.
be developed so that you might understand it.
You could create a format, just a.
Well, maybe that's something that we ought to look at, because I know I struggle with it, I know Stan struggles with it. Chris is just learning this, so I mean, but, and I can't speak for Kathy, this is her first year here, but, you know, if you had something like an Excel sheet that, which you could see it, and then it becomes very clear. And maybe that's something we can develop, either through Fred or whatever.
Well, let's do it before October 7th.
all right, yeah, sorry, you can do that.
I mean, you might have just
That'll
stuck your
teach
back
you.
foot in your mouth about it, but maybe you can assist us or assist Kim or somebody, yeah.
Quote unquote.
The other thing when Fred makes his yearly visit, if I could see if he could come a half an hour before and maybe talk with you guys. I
Whatever.
mean, he makes it
Yeah.
his yearly visit at the end of the audit, ask you if you have any questions. I can see if maybe he can come a little bit early. We can ask these questions and then he can be here for the beginning of the meeting. If that's anything that would help you guys do.
Well, I'm just trying to get something done before the next meeting.
Right.
So that was my point, is
For October 7th.
I think we need to get something, understand this before the next meeting, which gives us 2 weeks. Is it 2 weeks or 3 weeks? I don't know.
Let me see what Sarah's got done so far. And if she's got any numbers that would give us a little bit more of a definite number than just this is 63, could be higher or lower. I'll ask her.
Okay. I mean, I need an education, and I'm sure Stan does, and perhaps Chris does.
Let me see what I get for a response from
Kathy,
Sarah or Fred, and then
Yeah.
you guys can decide on October 7th.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, okay. Okay, now the next item is this road safety, which is the Cambridgeport intersection. Bill, you contacted the state and they're willing to do a survey, as I understand?
The survey doesn't cost anything. We have to fill out the form. We have to tell them what the issues are. So I would like to get some input on that. Other than the fact that there's some conflict once in a while, especially when people don't follow the signs, which is kind of like every intersection in the world. But that is the thing. But the idea would be to ask them to see if the yield, stop, and free flow, those three intersections, the three different roads, is the best solution, or should there be something else? And we can ask them that, and if they will do it, they will do it for free.
I make a motion that we have the state come in and do their, whatever they call it, their traffic audit at the intersection for Cambridgeport, and I'll make that motion.
And is there a cost associated with it, or?
No, there's none.
Okay. I'll second.
It's just one of those things, everybody's familiar, you know, we're talking about where 35 and 121 comes together in Cambridgeport. It's a three-way intersection there, and there's three different, one has no indication of what to do, one is a yield, and one is a stop.
Right.
Yeah, actually, there's some confusion with the signage. As you're coming from Saxon's River, approaching the T, there is a sign that says yield ahead. That is kind of turned to the side right now, and that's probably, yeah, as you're coming from Saxon's River up to the T, it's on the right, I think just past the store. It says yield ahead, it's an old sign. And so I think that may confuse out-of-towners at least, who often, come to a complete stop there. And which is not unusual for a T intersection to be a stop anyways for the stem. So that's confusing, but there's that extra sign in there that may be sowing some confusion for the free flow.
Also, the visibility when you're coming from Grafton, and cars don't really show up on the bridge till they're almost around the corner, so that there's a visibility issue.
Yeah, it's a problem.
And coming off Parker Hill, there's visibility going left or right.
Yeah.
And they don't stop at the stop sign coming from Athens. They don't stop.
No.
They
Well,
just
we've asked,
whip around the corner.
based on that, we did ask the sheriff's department to sit down there and see if they could, issue some tickets, or we haven't heard if they,
He was down there.
he was there?
Yeah, I heard he was down there, but I don't know whether he issued tickets or not.
I didn't see him.
I haven't heard anything, any report from them.
No, but somebody told me that the sheriff was sitting down there.
I asked him to go down.
Yeah, so he did or she did react to our request, but what happened there, I don't understand.
All right, so anyway, so I got a motion.
Any other discussion?
Is there a second?
Yes, Dan was the,
I made the
yeah, and.
Second.
So, all in favor of having them do a study on that intersection, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Danny, you gotta just give us an outgoing report of what's going on.
Still hauling in the winter sand, grading, got a little bit more mowing to do. We got like 2 roads left of mowing to do. And tomorrow, clean up on the Young's property, the island that was created.
Oh, you're only doing it?
So that is, they're there today getting stuff ready, and tomorrow we'll be loading some of it out.
Which is being paid for by GIA, let us underline.
Well, the town is also paying because we're using our trucks and equipment, correct?
Yeah.
So we are contributors. Any other questions of Danny?
Well, I spoke to Maureen Parker, and she says the best thing is after 3:30 when Mike's there, 'cause she has to work.
I'm gonna need to know a better day than that, since we get done at 2.
Weekends? I don't know.
Yeah, anything after 2 will be overtime.
I think I can do it, but I just need a little bit more, because I can't be just told end of the day to be down there.
It's for their schedules because of the kids. She said after 3:30.
Well, I guess you're gonna have to work that out, Kathy, with
Yeah.
with the crew and see what's available. Any other questions of Danny or the board on roads? Okay. The next item is discussion on select board policies and procedures, and the reason why this came up, there was some discussion, there was some speaking, some concerns expressed on procedures and the way the town operates. And number one is that we do not use Robert Rules of Order. On February 19th, 2018, Ron Plett was the individual who prompted this, and we took VLCT's policy and amended it. So we use our own rules of procedure for the town of Grafton, available for anybody to see. So we are not using Robert's Rules of Order. Okay? I know that when I mentioned that, there was some not noise, but some oohs and ahs that we don't, so this is not something that we changed. We don't use it. It was officially voted. And our procedures are here, and we try to adhere to them as much as we possibly can. The second thing is, the point of order that was given by one of the individuals there was incorrect, because the point of order should have been for the motion that was on the floor, and the motion that was on the floor was to call the question. And I wasn't sure of the rule. I don't normally keep my Robert's Rules of Order, or have these procedures, which doesn't exactly talk about the little nuances from it. But I let it go, as in the spirit of letting things happen in transparency, which apparently has been in question along the time. Some of the select board members, I mean, the audience has said the select board perhaps has not been transparent in some things. So, I have tried to be as lenient as possible for discussion from the floor. But I want everybody to understand something, and that is that this is not a public meeting. This is not a town meeting. This is a meeting of the select board. And the select board has their meetings with a public format. We don't do things behind anybody's back. It's in the open. And we have a public comment, and it's at our discretion of what we allow to be discussed. We try to run it so that we give everybody an opportunity to speak, and we try to take their advice. But it is our meeting. It is not a public meeting. So there is a difference. At the town meeting, it's a public meeting. When you have a hearing, which is coming up on the 17th, anybody can speak. It's what it is. But on the select board meeting, you are invited to come to see what we do here, and we welcome your comments. But the comments have to be germane to what we're talking about, and they have to be, on target. So I just want to make this clarification, because I think there's some confusion, I should say, I guess, of that this is not a real public, it's not a public meeting in the sense of a public meeting. It's a meeting of the select board in the public. So I'm gonna try to be as lenient as I possibly can. But in the future, I'm going to try to make sure that when there is public comment, that it's germane to what we're talking about. I don't want to hear it 3 times. And I'm certainly want to make sure that we have transparency here, which I will do. I have been, I believe, probably maybe too transparent in a lot of ways. I don't want to stifle anybody's questions or opinions or whatever. And so I just would hope that everybody would get maybe a copy or look it up. I don't know, Bill, is this on the website or something?
Yes, it is.
Take a look at the weird procedures. I will have them here, so in the event that we come into a situation, I or the board can refer it. And I would also say to the board, hey, listen, if there's something that I don't catch everything, speak up. And if there's something that you need to stop, let me know or let that individual know. And there's also the final thing is about the agenda. Okay, there was some comment about, well, how do you get on the agenda? It's very simple. You call Bill, you go in to see him, and you say, and you request, I want to go on the agenda. Or if you can't reach Bill, you can see me. And you get on there. However, all agenda items are not going to get on. It's the chair's discretion and the board's discretion. If the meeting is too full, it might not go on this week. Maybe it goes on the following week. But we want to have, if you want to be on the agenda, you tell us and you get on the agenda. Nobody wants to stop anybody who wants to speak, who has a problem or needs to be done. So at that, I'll just be quiet. Do we have any comment? Okay. The next item is gravel pit update. Stan, you want to do that one?
Yeah. We've had for the past couple of years we've been buying our gravel for the roads. We used to be able to get it out of our own pits, have it crushed, and just pay basically the crushing fees and trucking to wherever we had to get it to if we needed it outside what the town would normally use it for. But anyway, what we're doing now is we have to buy everything. We're paying basically wholesale price for trucking and for the price of crushing and the gravel itself. So we've always talked about trying to get our own gravel pit again, as we had some of these areas down the road down here. We excavated out some years ago. And if you notice in the town plan, there's a couple of areas in there that also suggest that the town look for its own gravel pit. So with that in mind, we've contacted Luann and Errol Ward just up the road up here. This whole back area, it does have gravel in it. We don't know how much. We did, Joe and I went up a couple days ago when we spoke to both Errol and Luann. They're giving some property, they have quite a chunk of property up there. They're giving some property away to the grandkids, which is a great thing to do. And we said that we're not at all interested in the property that they want to give away. We're not pressuring them whatsoever to sell property. We're just trying to get their thought process on whether they'd be willing to sell property to us. And they thought that they could certainly come around and find that to be a favorable thing. So what we left the meeting with them, we suggested that we would bring in a surveyor, just so we knew better boundaries. There's always there always seems to be some discrepancies whenever there's a boundary is determined, whether they're 2 feet or 20 feet. But there's always seems to be some discrepancy. So we're going to talk to probably Devo, have him come up and show us where the land is. And if we can agree on that, then we'd like to come in and get do some testing, either some boring or whatever the best way to determine how much gravel would be on the site once we determine property boundaries, and if it's even worthwhile investing for the town, investing in that piece of property based on best guesses. I don't know how geologists or whoever these people are that do this, that there's 5 years worth of gravel or 10 years worth of gravel based on how many yards of gravel we go through during the course of a year. So anyway, we're pursuing that, and just based on, we think that the town should have its own gravel pit, and the advantage of obviously using the Ward's area, it's already attached to this boundary, and that boundary is together. So anyway, so we did go up and talk with them. They're at least reasonably to look forward to how we can move forward on this.
So we would pay for the survey, the town?
Yeah, I think we should. Yeah.
So I think
it's already been surveyed. I don't think it's going to be a big deal, but we have to be able to find the pins.
But I think, Danny, at some point, we have to go up there and do some test pits to see whether or not there's anything left in there.
Right, and whatever the best way to do that. I don't know if it's a good way just to go up to the backhoe and dig a hole, or you drill down and,
Yeah, I'm not sure what spots you're talking about.
well, we're not either.
We're not
We
either.
don't
We
even
need
know,
to
that's
find
why
it.
we wanna get,
That's why we need to do some
right.
test holes.
right.
There might not be any gravel there left, I don't know.
Well, didn't Jamie Gregory take gravel out of that pit during our rain?
No,
That was
That I
our,
know
that was the town's pit.
Oh,
yeah, no, they took some out of Holy Bell, wasn't it some out there?
Our property line goes right up to the trailer on top of the hump, right to the back of it.
of, where the ledge is.
Yeah.
But nobody really knows how much gravel is left
Yeah,
in
we
there.
don't know. And they don't know, Harold isn't aware, but
No,
we just felt as though it was worthwhile just to look into it and try to get an idea.
it makes sense.
so Stan and I went back there and, you know, there's trees in the way and there's gravel under the trees, I don't know.
Yeah,
So I think you should give it some thought to it, Danny, and talk to Bill and whatever, and see, you know, if we can do some test, get a geologist or something, I mean, he's willing to indicate, indicated to us that he's willing to do something, sell the land or whatever.
Yeah, I think you just gotta determine what area he's
Yeah,
oh, yeah, absolutely.
interested in selling.
Sure.
Cause if it's on the backside of the creek, that's pretty much, he already emptied that.
he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just,
Well, it's not, certainly not his field, I mean, Harold's field probably got gravel in it, but that's not what he would want us to dig.
that's where the gravel was at.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, he indicated that it was in the piece that he had already given away to his grandkids, and we're aware of that.
Yeah.
so it might not be a
It
lucrative
may not
prospect.
pan out, but I think we have to start somewhere and start looking. So if you don't take a first step, you're never gonna take it. So,
Then somebody indicated there's some gravel on Anderson Road. And
Yeah.
I learned today that the individual who owns the property has no desire to sell the land or sell any to Grafton, whether there was 1,000 yards or 5 million yards in there, so that's a site that you gotta ignore.
Yeah.
So, yes, Bill?
I kind of hesitant to bring this up, but I think if you guys are gonna start looking for gravel and you have ideas where you're looking, it might be a really good idea to go in executive session and discuss those sites, rather than have them bought out from under you and then sold to you.
You might be right.
Yeah, so I think if there are areas where there is gravel, then let's talk about them, but you're allowed to talk about acquiring property in executive session, and that's the reason. And I really think that's where it should go. But the other thing is, I think there's a lot of brain power in this room that people could, and a lot of people have walked backwoods and they know the land, and if there's anybody else that has an idea where there might be some gravel, then that should be discussed, but I don't think we should discuss it on TV.
Okay. Point well taken, Bill.
Can I
Any
just,
other comments on this? Yes, Ken?
I mean, is there like an estimate or an idea of what boring test holes cost and
No.
surveying, and shouldn't this be something that's built into the upcoming budget prior to just jumping in and saying we're gonna do
Probably,
this
and that's why I
testing?
think we started now. And I think there's a whole bunch of things that we're gonna have to talk about with the upcoming budget, and this is one of them.
Okay.
Because there's gonna be some upfront cost to do some site work. I just can't imagine you're just gonna.
Right,
gonna
budget wise
miraculously
for the
here.
next budget, because we
Exactly.
have nothing in it this one.
Right, it would be for next budget. Anything else? Kathy had concern of what's happening with the Wyndham Regional, and Bill, can you give us an update?
I have not heard one word from, John Bennett was supposed to get back to me in 2 weeks. It's been at least 3, and I've not heard from him. I will, while I'm gone, but I'll have the computer with me, I'll write to John and see if I can find out where he stands.
And who was John Bennett? Is he
John Bennett,
Wyndham Regional?
Yes.
So we have no response or information if it's been accepted,
I've
the
got
plan,
zip.
nothing?
I've got nothing from him. And I wrote to Chris and John wrote me back saying that John would do it, but he was busy. You know, they had some shakeup down there and they lost some people, unfortunately. An untimely death for the finance director, so they had to fill some positions and they moved a lot of people around. And so they've been really they've been trying to get a lot of work done with fewer people. And so that might be the reason, but I will check with John and see when he comes back to
And
me.
nothing from Dave Culver? He hasn't responded to you
With
on
regard to,
Wyndham Regional, nothing?
no.
Kathy? Lisa?
I have a question. Are we talking about the entire town plan? Has the entire town plan with the proposed edits by the select board been sent to Wyndham Regional?
Yes.
Or,
The whole time, but
and the report that was submitted from the planning commission also?
I don't know. I know the town plan was submitted.
I'm pretty sure I sent him everything.
Including the report from the planning commission?
I'm pretty sure I did. But the report from the planning commission at that time didn't say a whole heck of a lot.
No, there's a very distinct statement in the planning commission's report about 2 points where it
I'm
appears.
sorry, when I sent it to him, that report had not been sent. As a matter of fact, that report has yet to be delivered to the select board.
No. That report was produced at the planning commission meeting on, I believe, August 13th.
I don't know, it may have been produced, it may have been approved, it may have been everything else. It has never been presented to the select board. And I've asked Dave to present it. I've asked Chuck Wise to present it, officially present it. They sent a draft, and I wrote him back and I said, when is this going to be completed? I didn't even get an answer to that, much less a report. They have not sent a report to the select board yet.
As a select person, I have not received anything from Bill as a result
That's
of that.
different from what was discussed at the planning commission. According to the planning commission, the report, which was created after the select board's edits, was approved by the planning commission and subsequently submitted.
But it wasn't submitted to Bill, because we don't have a copy.
Chris, can you shed some light on it? You're on both boards.
I cannot. I don't know the status of it. But we need to track
You
it
know,
down.
it took me a long time to get them to give me any report at all. They have not. I write to both of them and I get no response from either one of them. As a matter of fact, if you want to take something else back to the planning commission, their mail that I write and tell them that's sitting on the desk and on the table is still there. And that's been 6 months, 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So, no, I get nothing out of the planning commission. And no, there has been no presentation of report.
And I can rest assured that if it came into the office, we would have it, it would be disseminated by Bill to.
But as soon as I got it,
And I don't think anybody here has seen that, so. So Bill will get back to the board.
I'll talk to John Bennett.
Kathy, the second thing is the hearing on the 17th. I
Right.
personally have not, I can tell you, I have not even broached Bill yet. We have a month away, and I wouldn't even tell you what the procedures are, but I'm sure hearing procedures are listed in the statutes, correct?
The procedure is basically, you open the meeting to, and you can meet, it is a public hearing.
Yes.
It's not a meeting in select board, it's a public
Okay.
hearing called by the select board. You open the hearing and you say, you have in front of you the town plan. Is there any discussion? And
Right.
then it goes from there.
Yep.
That is the agenda. Same agenda we had at the school when we had the first public hearing.
And that is a public hearing, that is not a select board hearing, so anything goes. So. Any other comments on that?
Yeah, one
Yeah.
quick thing. Excuse me.
You okay?
Chris, can you make sure that information gets forwarded to the select board?
You mean the town plan report?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I thought,
I'm sorry, it has to be presented by the planning commission to the select board. Somebody
Yeah.
can't just send me an email and say, here's the report that they did. The planning commission chair should write an email and say, this is the report, I am presenting it to the select board.
So
That's the law.
I
The
would
law
get
says
Dave
they have to
Culver
do
to
it.
run it, to get it over tomorrow morning to the selectman's office.
Well, I like to think somebody would move this along, so, you know, Chris is the likely fella, whether he likes it or not, because he serves on both boards. So-
I could write to Dave tomorrow and say, where is it?
Yeah.
And to Chuck, but I did that 2 or 3 weeks ago and I got no answer.
Okay.
Any public comment? Oh, Lisa?
So this is actually directly related to what we are just now talking about. I'm going to bring up the same question that was discussed at the Planning Commission, which has to do with the fact that we now have an appearance of potential conflict with Chris serving on both the Planning Commission and the Select Board. And I understand fully that it is not a legally, technically incompatible situation. I understand that.
But we had that discussion at the special town meeting, and it's okay with VLCT, and it's okay with the attorney, so why are we discussing this again, Lisa?
Yeah, so may I continue? So we understand from the Planning Commission meeting that the VLCT did say that the situation is not legal, not illegal, and technically it's okay, but it's not advisable. So we do know that that was the VLCT's opinion.
Okay, so what is the point?
The point is that it may not be in the best interest of the town to have the appearance of a conflict where one person now serves on 2 boards which are, as we all are aware, of a very different opinion about our town plan. And we are in the midst of discussing the town plan. So there was a full discussion about the matter on the Planning Commission. The Planning Commissioners expressed their opinions and concerns. And it was said at the Planning Commission that the Select Board should possibly have the same discussion.
We're not gonna have a discussion. We voted at a special meeting to appoint Chris to fill the position until next March, and that's the end of it. Done, finish. There's no discussion.
So the appearance of a conflict, which according to VLCT is not advisable and not in the best interest of the town, is just,
It's just frailty. It's not a legal conflict. So
we understand that,
Okay.
but it's the reality.
The wording is not that it's not advisable. The wording is that there are situations when it could be there could be an appearance of a conflict, and they gave 3 examples, none of which are presented by anything that is currently going on between the Planning Commission or the Select Board.
Well, perhaps the VLCT was not informed of the particular situation which does exist. The reality of it is that we have a particular situation in Grafton now, and perhaps the VLCT does not even
Okay, look,
know about that.
VLCT represents 200 and some other towns in the state. I'm sure they've had other issues with this. That's their report, and we're gonna stand by it. Do we have any other public comment?
Long time ago, we served together on the board. I was on the select board for 8 years, a long time ago, and I served for some of those years as the chairperson. And I had then many discussions with the town attorney, same person that you have now, about a number of issues that were problematic, that were difficult. And Robin repeated to me every time something that I will never forget, that as public officials, it was and is public officials' responsibility to have absolutely not even the appearance of any wrongdoing or conflict, because you're leaders in the community and are held to a higher standard. So that the fact that something is legal, this from Robin, I'm not making it up. She reminded me of this frequently. The fact of something being doable does not mean that it's advisable or the right thing to do. And next, that as public officials, you're obliged to do not just what you can, but what is in fact leading the community in what is right and good. And that is what she said. I don't know what she's telling you now, but she said that to me over and over again. And I took it very seriously. And we surely do need leaders today and always who guide us in a moral and upright sense about what is right and what is advisable, the best advice, with no appearance of wrongdoing or conflict.
Well, thank you. Any other public comment? Kim?
On another note, everybody that has a homestead should have received their newly revised tax bills. They are blue. The first quarter has a smaller amount due, and that will be due by October 15th or 17th, I don't remember. Anything after that date will incur the 1% penalty. Okay? So I just want to make sure everybody's aware. You want to use your blue tax bills for tax purposes when you're filing your income 2019 income tax. You disregard the red and white ones that we first sent out to you. The non-residents did not receive a new revised tax bill. The figure was correct on the educational tax rate. Thank you to Hardy, he figured it right to the penny. So only the homesteads, 199 of them went out.
I had
Can I
a,
add something to that?
Yes.
Okay, so just because you live in, this came up the other day, if you live in Grafton and you didn't file for homestead, you're gonna use your original bill. Only the people who filed for homestead are
Right,
getting
the 199.
There are some people who live
resident.
here full time, you know, who don't file for homestead, and then they don't get in the credit.
So we have to read five? Yeah, read five.
I had a discussion with a resident today, and I thought that resident was hard to believe that the residents are paying a higher tax than the non-residents. And that is the fact. And so that we all understand, Bill and I have been in contact, we're discussing now to get Carolyn Partridge and her other person in here at a select board meeting coming up so that we can tell them that we are very dissatisfied and why this can happen. I wasn't here, but I was understood that when the Act 60 went in, or I don't remember, that they promised that the residents would never pay a higher tax than the non-residents. Well, guess what? Okay. So that's where we are. And also, because of the school situation, I don't know how many people know that they have changed attorneys now within the Brattleboro Reformer. We're trying to get, who are we trying to get here, Bill?
Well, we wanted to see if David Clark will come.
Yeah, if David Clark would come to give us an update, since we have no school board anymore. So, just as a, any other Carter?
Also, the reason why we have this additional tax is because of the merger.
Yes, of course.
100%.
Yeah, and Westminster
It
goes
was
down.
worth 15 cents to us.
And Westminster's taxes are down,
Yes.
and they get two-thirds of it, they don't even pay their own tax. They get money from the state. Because they're receiving tax. So that's the situation. Any other public comment? Do we have any other business? Move to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. Second? All right. All in favor of adjournment? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Just a reminder, the next meeting is October 7th. Thank you for coming.